Hello, this is Dr. K. Today I'm going to discuss some of the important terms and information that is presented in Chapter 1 of your textbook. Chapter 1 contains mostly background information, but there are a few key themes that you will see repeated throughout the course, and I'd like to touch on those today. So first, it's important to understand that environmental science is an interdisciplinary science. One of the reasons that environmental science is so interesting and why the AP exam is so difficult is that it requires knowledge of chemistry, of biology, of ecology, of earth sciences, of atmospheric sciences, and it combines that with the social sciences. So it has a very broad number of topics that we are going to be studying. Now, environmental scientists look at the environment for signs of stress. And many of those stresses are caused by the interactions of humans with the environment. There are environmental services which we are, as human beings, are used to sustain our lives. And these services include clean water, lumber, agricultural land, and fisheries. And these are just a few examples. But environmental scientists also look at environmental indicators as a means of measuring the health of the environment. And on this page, we have the 5 key environmental indicators. These major indicators include biological diversity or biodiversity, food production, the average global surface temperature and CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere, the human population, and how humans are depleting resources. So the first environmental indicator I mentioned is biodiversity, and we're going to see biodiversity throughout the course. Biodiversity can be measured in 3 major ways. So the first level of biodiversity is ecosystem diversity. And ecosystem asks what variety of ecosystem diversity is looking at the variety of ecosystems within a region. So how many different ecosystems exist in a region? And if you look at this pretty figure over here, you can see that you have a variety of ecosystems. You have an ocean ecosystem, a shoreline ecosystem, a grassland ecosystem, and then you have several mountain ecosystems, which probably include woodlands and alpine ecosystems. So within this area, pictured here, we have a large number of ecosystems. The next level of biodiversity is evaluating the number of species that exist within an ecosystem, and this is called species diversity. So in this sample ecosystem, we have grasslands, bushes, trees, and other plants. We also have several animal species. So in general, the larger the number of species, the healthier an ecosystem is. Now, the biodiversity, which I find most fascinating, is genetic diversity. So this is the variety of genes or phenotypes that are available within a population of or within a species, okay, within the different individuals within the species. So a genetically diverse species has a number of unique characteristics or phenotypes within the species. These differences make members of the species fit for environmental changes. So a genetically similar population is less likely to survive disasters or diseases and more likely to become extinct. A great example of this is recent genetic studies that were performed on the woolly mammoth. And here is a pretty picture of a woolly mammoth. Now, as you know, the woolly mammoth is extinct. There are no woolly mammoths roaming the earth. And here is a note to you. I like genetics. So, this study was published in a journal this year called PLOS One. And about 45,000 years ago, there were plenty of woolly mammoths that ranged in northern North America and northern Eurasia. So about 4,000 years ago, however, there were only about 300 woolly mammoths left, and they were isolated on an island off the coast of Siberia. This island's called Wrangel Island. So scientists compared the genome of the 45,000-year-old mainland mammoth and that of the 4,000-year-old Wrangel Island woolly mammoth. They had carcasses, which they have found as different glaciers and ice has melted. So the smaller population of more recent mammoths had a large number of what the authors called unhelpful mutations. These mutations included deletions and stop codons in the middle of necessary proteins. The scientists who performed the study claimed that the extinction is less due to inbreeding and more due to the fact that the population was small and isolated, and there was a lack of competition between members within the species, and that allowed these unhelpful mutations to build up within the species. These mutations were incompatible with survival and reproduction, and the authors called this a genetic meltdown, and that was resulted in the extinction of the woolly mammoth. Now, I like to include little Easter eggs for watching the video, and here is your Easter egg for watching. These are the answers for the multiple choice questions in the chapter. This is section 1.1, section 2, section 3, and the answers at the end of the chapter. So you can pause here and copy these down and quiz yourself with the multiple choice questions at the end of the chapter. Another major concept that you will be studying is the idea of greenhouse gases and temperature of the earth. So greenhouse gases are naturally occurring gases in the atmosphere, such as carbon dioxide, methane, even water vapor is a greenhouse gas. And what happens is light energy comes down and enters our atmosphere, and it hits the earth. Now, some of it is absorbed by the oceans and the earth, but another part of it is reflected back up into the atmosphere. So the greenhouse gases are forming, it's almost like a piece of glass in a greenhouse. They will help trap the heat and they'll reflect it back to Earth. So, like I said, this is similar to energy being trapped within a greenhouse. Now, this is very important since without greenhouse gases, the temperature of the Earth would be too cold and it would not be compatible with life. What you hear and read about global warming has to do with carbon dioxide, which is the most significant greenhouse gas. Now, water vapor, I believe, is the most potent greenhouse gas, let's say, but carbon dioxide is what humans are producing. So Humans are upsetting the natural balance of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And this is done through our modes of transportation and industrial uses. Remember, carbon dioxide is a product of emissions. So, this anthropogenic increase in the level of carbon dioxide is increasing the average global surface temperature of the Earth. Anthropogenic means that it is caused by humans. Now, I want to make one thing clear. The Earth does undergo natural cooling and warming cycles, and we are in a warming cycle. The cooling cycles are known as our ice ages. But the current temperature change is greater than is attributable to natural causes. This graph shows you over the last 400 years or so, this is the level of carbon dioxide in parts per million in the atmosphere. Okay, that is the blue line that you see versus the global surface temperature, which is this this orange line, and you can see that both are increasing and are correlated with one another. Another really important set of terms that we're going to be using throughout the course are developed versus developing nations. Developed nations are industrialized and have highly developed economies. Examples of developed nations include the United States, Japan, and Western Europe nations. Developing nations are nations that, without those broad economies, and many of them are agrarian societies, so many African countries are considered developing nations. This slide is just illustrating that developed nations use a proportionately larger amount of resources, even though they only represent about 20% of the world's population. One way of measuring impact is through an ecological footprint, and we're going to be calculating our ecological footprint this week. Ecological footprints measure the amount of land that's needed to support an individual's lifestyle. It includes how much energy we use, how many renewable and non-renewable resources that we're using, and how much food and the type of food that we eat. So all of this impacts or leaves a footprint on the earth. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I will be seeing you on the web soon.